I know one thing that a very specific member of my family, in fact, the thing that stopped them going out and getting a jab was a single video of Joe Biden saying, if you get vaccinated, you'll get free fries from McDonald's. I would say the force with which, if they'd have just gone a little bit lighter, maybe they, I don't know, would have duped more people. But I think a lot of people knew this isn't right. You don't try and sell me a medical experiment by selling fries. There is a military industrial complex.
Yes.
There are people profiting, and it's not about, for many in the establishment, in the deep state, it's not about you know, ending a war, it's about continuing a war.
Yes.
We the people have the ability to kind of, you know, journalism degree or not, stand up, and as long as you can acknowledge not to lie, you know, as long as you can deliver facts, as long as you can speak with authenticity, then that's what we need more of, because independent voices are necessary.
I'm really delighted to have with me today Mr. Hayden Appleby. It's an absolute pleasure. I'm so grateful that you came all the way from Essex to southwest London to join me here. Now, you are a journalist and you also have your own podcast called The Utter Truth by Hayden Appleby.
it.
Is that right?
That is, yeah, that's it. And
What a
thank you
title.
also, Ash, for having me. It's an honour.
Oh, the privilege is all mine. So tell me a little bit about yourself. What do you think it was, for example, that made you see through the COVID narrative? When did you start to realise that something's not quite right here, what they're asking of us, what the state was asking us to do under this guise of a public health emergency?
Yes. Yeah, I would say that, and what I will always credit is not actually a thing. It wasn't kind of a huge event that, you know, some people have a night or a day or a moment that sparks it, don't they? But I will always credit a person, which was my nan, who I feel is still the guiding light through all the kind of expose of corruption I hope to do and conduct. And yeah, so I would say it was her. She, who knows where the spark was within her. I think she was always very much willing to stand up to power. And so these sudden restrictions, these sudden ideas that were floating around, it was almost like an innate bone in her body that was from the beginning that said, I'm going to look into this, and then this, and those discussions sparked within the family, obviously. And yeah, so I will always credit my wonderful nan.
Yes, I'm very sorry. Of course, she is no longer with us. Obviously, her spirit, I'm sure, is still here by your side, and probably by all our sides at this, in this moment. But what did she say to you, or what were the discussions that you had?
It was very much kind of just questions in the beginning, which I think is why it's so offensive actually, and outrageous when you have these labels that people throw, you know, conspiracy theorist, anti-vax, that we have out there. Because actually a lot of people, this wasn't kind of, it didn't start out as, oh, we're gonna be rebels. It was actually, no, I have doubts about this and about that. So it was general questions. She would question things that most of us, I think, deep down questioned, like, you know, removing your mask when you sit down in a restaurant, but wearing it to walk to the toilet, you know, things like that. She would question. She questioned the very narrative from the beginning, and I think she already was kind of following people on social media who were speaking truth to power on other issues. And I'll never forget her saying that these certain individuals were predicting this or something on social media, and obviously I was a lot younger then. It kind of went out one ear, went in one ear, out the other. But no, a lot of it then, it plants seeds, doesn't it, in my mind, in my mum's mind, family members' minds, And I think that's really what has happened in the public sphere. People, fearless journalists, have kind of planted seeds, and people have then asked more questions, so on and so forth. And so, yeah, it's the general asking of questions. I think you can never go wrong doing that.
Yes, it stood you in good stead.
Yeah.
Did you always want to be a journalist? Is this something you...
No.
What did you see yourself doing when you were at school? Did you have... Because some
very-
kids don't have an idea. But,
Oh no, it was a very clear actor from the beginning, very clear. And then there was a little bit of lawyer somewhere throughout, you know, how it varies.
Yes.
But it was always something very performance-based, I suppose. Something where I could explore complex topics, which I guess you do in law, in acting, and then hence journalism. And no, it was very much COVID, the event itself, where this kind of idea sparked. I started to be inspired by other journalists and individuals, and the more they were cancelled and censored for speaking the truth, the more I thought, you know what, we need more people like this, and that's really where it came from.
Yeah, we do need more. We need
Yeah.
more. We've lost a lot of journalists, haven't we?
Yes,
I mean, I'd say to the dark side, to be honest.
Yeah,
People,
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that your nan was speaking truth to power, but there were so many people I knew who, in the past, I respected them because I thought they were challenging other state narratives. You know, I saw you speaking with George Galloway.
Yes.
And he was quite an inspirational figure when I was growing up. I always admired him when he went to the Senate in the United States. I've seen those videos, and he spoke truth to power. He went in their backyard and you know, told them his truth. You know, even though a lot of people were scared for him that maybe now that he's in America they might arrest him or lock him up because he was so outspoken against the Iraq War, and he bravely set foot there and spoke at the Senate. And so
Fearless.
You're fearless, yes. So when he was quite a sort of pro-lockdown supporter, isn't he? He wanted quite harsh lockdowns. That surprised me. So it's quite interesting, isn't it, that we say truth to power, but there's so many people who didn't see through this, which was quite sad. And other people as well. Through George Galloway, I came across Noam Chomsky and many other figures who just crumbled, basically, to some degree.
Yeah.
And went along with it all.
Certainly, yeah. I like to think in these two categories, these two camps almost, that you have individuals on one hand who I think very much, you know, they'll select issues that they feel, you know, oh, it would be interesting to explore this, or it would be interesting to tackle this, but actually they know that while it might be controversial, they will still it won't separate them from the establishment, if that makes sense, from what some might call a deep state. They'll still be a part of that, but then there's another group where actually that doesn't matter to them, the establishment, the deep state, whatever issue it is. They are, as we keep saying, fearless and uncovering things. It's it's very important, and that's the group of people I respect.
Obviously, you're very, very young. You're only 18 at the moment, so you've just left school. So when this all started in 2020, you would have been about 13, going on 14. Is that right?
That's it. Yeah.
So this is remarkable because people have always asked, they said, where are all the young people? We need more young revolutionaries on the marches and so forth. That's been a concern for a lot of people, that we're all of a certain age. And to some degree we can appreciate and understand that, because I think that our freedoms have really been eroded in the last, especially in the last decade. It's really accelerated, but it's been happening even before then, of course. So it's quite understandable that there aren't that many, I think, young people out there standing up for and seeing through the sort of the bullshit, really, because children have been brought up so indoctrinated and taught to not question. Those days of saying you go to school to question things and ask questions, and you should be inquisitive and curious. I know myself as a teacher that those days are long gone.
Yes.
It's not something that's promoted and encouraged whatsoever. In fact, kids are now preached to, just memorize things and take everything that they're told. Follow this curriculum.
Like
follow this
cogs in a
agenda.
machine.
Yes, exactly. That's really well put. What's your experience amongst the youth? You being in the school, did you find yourself amongst others who were also very concerned about what was going on?
Yes, it's the youth situation I find very interesting, because for the last couple of years, for a long while really, I was very much of the mindset that yes, young people, they're very brainwashed, they're very indoctrinated in schools, whether it be in households, from social media. There's a lot of indoctrination, whereas obviously older people, they've been through life, they've seen scandals unravel before, they've seen governments lie before, they maybe care more, they have a mortgage to pay. So I was very much of that mindset. There's also a lot of word of young people being woke as well. You hear that a lot, that we're very, very woke. And my experience differs a little bit. I find that there's two sides to the coin. There's no real in the middle. You either, yes, do have young people who will be very, very woke. They'll be kind of politically maybe far left. They'll, with a lot of things, and they won't speak truth to power. During COVID, they would have been very much compliant. But then there is another side to the coin that I think the media ignores a lot, and maybe that's to enforce this division. But yes, of young people who are very much wanting to think of their future, who are very much not compliant, weren't compliant during COVID, and those who were and did put on a mask to enter the school building, it was still deep down, they genuinely believed something was wrong. They didn't agree, they had questions they were asking. So I don't think we give young people enough credit.
I think you make a fantastic point there, and you remind me of my own experiences with young people.
Yes.
And being very surprised, even as recently as the last couple of weeks, learning about some of my students, because you realise it's such a fast life, and you have so little time to actually get to know students and engage and find out more about them.
Definitely.
You can easily make assumptions, isn't it? Because they're quiet or they haven't said anything. But that doesn't mean that there's not anything going on. There's so much going on inside, isn't it? And contemplation. I think there's a lot of confusion. I think that's understandable, because kids have been thrown all sorts of curveballs, isn't it? There's so many different outlets. They're picking up stuff. Some kids in my school, they're talking about Andrew Tate, and others are talking about other characters, and they're very divisive figures all across the board, really. You've got the other one, Kanye West, and so I think it's also a very confusing time for young people.
There's a lot.
There's a lot to contend with. So there's also a lot of inconsistencies. So one day they may be not going along with certain narrative, and then the next day they're going on with another narrative, and they haven't been able to connect the dots, perhaps. But which is completely understandable, because it's happening to adults, of course, as well.
I completely agree.
I was just talking to a young girl a couple of days ago, and she said, I don't want to go to university. And I was thinking to myself that the school is really putting pressure on the sixth formers to go to university. Many of them don't want to go. I was not aware that many of them didn't want to go, but they were all made to sign on to it. In other words, just apply to UCAS. And later on, they said, if you don't want to go, then okay, fair enough. But for a long time, it was just putting them all under pressure. And making them conform and making them believe that the university was the way to go. It's all geared towards university. There's nothing about apprenticeships. They're bringing in all these people who are advocating and promoting, university as this most wonderful experience. It's almost like a cult ritual in a way, that you have to go through this. This is the only way. Whereas for me, the biggest fear was the debt that they would then incur, and all the interest from the banks.
Well, I wonder why it's being promoted, therefore.
Yes, exactly. It's sinister that this is coming from the school, from teachers who claim to care and so forth. But I was really very pleased and a little bit surprised to find that a lot of the kids said, I'm not going to university, even though this girl wants to be a journalist. And I was speaking to another journalist who was actually at one of my screenings, who worked for The Independent. And even she said that, I think just about everyone I know who's in journalism went to university. So I'm not sure if she was actually saying, I'm not sure if it's a good idea. I think it would be better for her to go. But I was so proud of this young lady for saying, I don't want to go to university. I just want to get into journalism. I don't think studying English, which is what she was being encouraged to do, is the right thing to do, for journalism. And I was so impressed by her. And I had no inkling that she had this rebellious and independent mindset. And slowly you get to know the people. And as you say, they do have their own opinions. Yes, a lot of the opinions do align with, let's say, the COVID narrative. A lot of things, a lot of the kids did align with that.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of aspects of them that don't align with a lot of the other agenda-driven strategies that the state, the deep state, have put in place. So that's pleasing.
Yes, yeah. You see a lot of questions being asked, and people my age having their own opinions also. So it is pleasing. I do have hope.
And you give me great hope as well, and I'm sure many other people. Could I go back again to ask about your nan, and just what sort of things were you uncomfortable about from the early days? What things did your nan highlight, and what things resonated with you around the COVID narrative?
I would say it was very much the force with which they were promoting things. We're told in school, we're taught from the beginning that historically this is what propaganda looked like, and this is what corruption looked like, and you think, oh, that was the past, that would never affect me. But it was the force with which things were being promoted. You saw kind of in the US, I know one thing that a very specific member of my family, in fact, the thing that stopped them going out and getting a jab was a single video of Joe Biden saying, if you get vaccinated, you'll get free fries from McDonald's, was it, or something? And it was the force with which they were doing this, almost like propaganda, the way we see it, the way we're taught it looks.
Yes.
And that's how they were doing it. And then, of course, mandates, from masks to restrictions such as not seeing family members. I mean, we think back on it, we had bubbles enforced. I was told by the state that I couldn't see over 5 or 6 people, and it's not normal. I think there's a part of your soul that knows these things aren't normal. I'm being told by other human beings what goes in my body, what covers my face. And so, yeah, I would say the force with which, if they'd have just gone a little bit lighter, maybe they, I don't know, would have duped more people. But I think a lot of people knew this isn't right. You don't try and sell me a medical experiment by selling fries. It's not. There was something sinister.
It's also so mocking. It's so insulting that's
Definitely.
how cheaply they value us. That
Like
they're not even bribing us with $1 million to put our lives at risk. They say, have some cheap kebab,
McDonald's.
McDonald's cheap level. It's
Very
terrible.
insulting. Yeah.
Jab for kebab we had here, didn't we? As well? I remember that.
Yeah.
Or you can go to the festivals. That was another way. All the famous rituals, again, that young people are encouraged to participate in. Glastonbury's become a young person's ritual.
It has.
It's not something that I see as an independent festival. I see this as part of the cult deep state. Many of these other things as well, like this idea of you can travel on your gap year, but only if you get jabbed. This is another cult ritual, you see.
Yeah.
And many other such things. They try to use those things. You can go to university, but you've got to get the jab.
They do. And I would add that a lot of people won't comment or won't have the time to care about these things or about COVID until it affects them. So when you are then told you can't go on holiday, when you're then told, you can't see so-and-so, it's easy to kind of ignore something, I don't know, going on in Palestine, something going on in Israel. It's easy to ignore that. It's not affecting you. And I don't blame people for that. We should focus on our family first. But then when it comes for your family, which they did, that's when people start to wake up. And I don't think they expected that.
Yes, that's right. I mean, I know that a lot of people, particularly those who were self-employed, and I think that was one of the big targets of this whole lockup. was to really target those independent people.
Definitely.
Because the other people who got their furlough, 80% furlough, the middle classes in their bigger houses and making sourdough bread, and they seem to wholeheartedly, a lot of them accept lockdown. They seem to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, felt very happy to be able to spend time with their family because they hadn't done in the past. So it was a very cleverly scripted game that they played because they got the middle classes on board, I think, very early on. So they seemed to buy into it.
Yes.
Obviously, it felt to me that the target really were those self-employed and independent business people because they weren't given any kind of support. And whereas all the big corporations and big companies and larger institutions were given huge amounts of money to stay shut.
Yes.
Or to participate and completely embrace this sort of cult.
Yeah.
But those small independent businesses were just left to rot, really.
To rot.
And I think that was the target, because if you take those people out of their independent livelihood, you bring them into a sort of control grid.
Yes.
They then have to find work because it's very difficult for them to operate. And I felt that they were the people that really woke up to this, maybe more than most. I think some of the working classes as well, because they had to carry on.
Definitely.
But they maybe didn't lose their jobs, but they were sort of made to go to the supermarket and work in the supermarket and carry on while everyone else perhaps didn't have to go through this, but they had to carry on working during these lockups.
Yeah. And I would say, just add to that, like you were saying with small businesses, it did act as an almost terrific method of reconstituting almost capitalism into corporatism. It was a terrific way to stifle kind of the free market, small businesses, people gaining a form of power, not just financial power, but there's an emotional power in that as well. When you have your own business, when you grow and can develop for your own family.
It's powerful.
And they were, exactly. And they were able to stifle that and push that down and very much form these corporate ties. And then, of course, those who were trying to provide are then reliant upon the state. So I think you would be foolish to not see some kind of a plan in this.
Yes. There were all sorts of experiments going on. I think one of the most egregious ones, apart from obviously the care homes, what happened over there with our older people and our vulnerable people as well, behind closed doors, putting them on DNRs. Obviously we know all about the midazolam and morphine cocktail. But also I think that other experiments were going on, like we just talked about these self-employed. That was another area of experimentation to destroy them. I think the kids, they planned Operation Moonshot in schools. You would be able to talk about your experience in school, but from what I saw, and I saw Dr. Kaufman talking about Operation Moonshot, he identified this leaked document in about September 2020. It was written by the British state. And in that document, the plan was to test the entire population every week. Obviously, they didn't get that far, but I'm certain that that's what was going on in schools, because the condition for the school to open up in the second lockdown, I think it was about March 2021, was that the kids would get tested initially in school 3 times a week, and after that for 2 weeks, and after that twice a week at home. And so they didn't inform our kids and their parents that they had to actually opt into this. So they weren't automatically opted in, but they gave the impression that they had to. And I made it very clear to our class, most of the kids didn't want to get this strange pokey thing shoved up their nose and in the back of their throats. So they were very scared. And they were scared of discovering that they were positive. They're very scared of that. They would basically be told that they're toxic, disease bags.
The enemy.
And the enemy, and they could harm their own grandmother. They played this in the propaganda, so they frightened, the heck out of the kids and their parents and everyone else. And so many children then were getting positive tests. And so then they would send the whole year group home. And that disruption, it was complete experimentation. To me, this was like a Nazi experiment. all these children were then sent home. The whole year group would be sent home because they were in their one bubble. Or they would ask, have you been in contact with these people? And they'd say, well, you've been in that. They'd know that they've been in that classroom with those kids. Then they go to another class and they're with a different group of kids. So they send the whole year group home. And many of those tests came back negative because they'd have to then take a PCR test to confirm. And then after 5 days of disruption, they'd be back in. And this was happening so often that all the teachers and all the media, they're all falling into this trap. Not the media, because the media were part of this agenda, but a lot of the people then, the teachers, the unions I think were part of the agenda as well, but a lot of the individuals and parents were saying the only way out is as the media are telling us and as the unions and our heads of school are telling us that we've got to get everybody vaccinated because otherwise we're going to have this constant disruption of kids going home, coming back, not knowing, this is so much part of the plan.
The miracle cure.
The miracle cure, yeah.
Yes.
What was your experience? You would have been, what year were you when they were?
I was kind of 10-ish. Year 10, yeah. So yeah, as we said, 13, 14. And
could you share a little bit about your own experience?
Yeah.
And what things did you feel they were doing that were really harmful to you and your friends and peers?
Yes, I feel it was very much, again, it was the blanket rules, the enforcement, you must all wear a mask, and you had the opportunity to get this exemption if you pushed for it. But again, it kind of alludes to what you said earlier, Ash, which is that you don't know, nobody knew, it wasn't advertised you could get an exemption. In the same way it wasn't advertised you could opt out of these tests. It's just if you push for it, and of course that requires a lot of bravery. So there was a lot of compliance, and I think just a lot of people, children, teachers, staff who didn't really care. It was just, this is the easy route. And again, I don't really blame them. You can't blame them. They're looking out for their family, their career. They're just trying to get by day. But yes, so there was a lot of compliance, but there was also a lot of private questioning as well. Not this form of mass non-compliance, but I would see friends, people around me who would say, oh yeah, I don't want this jab either. I don't want to wear this mask either. But there's a difference between obviously thinking it and acting on it, and obviously parents have an impact as well. But yes, I would say that a lot of young people did comply. It was easier to do so, but that was early days. I think now, as we were saying earlier, there's a lot of young people who are willing to ask these questions, and whether they're just saying it, who knows, but I do think there's more of an awakening happening. But just to pick up on the school again, I would say one of the experiences that really stuck out to me that I'll never forget, because it was quite upsetting actually, was a member of staff, so a teacher who happened to teach science. He had this moral superiority because of course he was a scientist, and so on this single day when there were lots of students going off to get jabbed in the school, this member of staff basically belittled those who chose not to do so and said it was ridiculous, you were probably listening to nonsensical arguments. He was basically implying you're a conspiracy theorist. And I remember there was a lot of anger within me because I thought that he was almost, without knowing it, just advancing this indoctrination to pupils, and it was obviously very inappropriate. But yes, so it was a battle to fight, and you're right, I think a lot of students were scared, young people were scared, people full stop were scared, and so we don't talk about that. We talk about, I think it's among the mainstream media a lot now too. It's acknowledged that lockdown was a failure, but we just look at the economy, we look at the lives lost, all of this is what's analysed, but we also don't analyse as much the emotional impact. We hear about, tragically, people losing their lives or taking their own life because they couldn't see their loved ones, but we don't hear about the millions who thankfully did not go that far, but were very much traumatized by it still. And we don't hear about that as much. And I think young people, there was a lot of fear mongering, and a lot of it was not fair. And I do blame the media a lot.
Totally.
Very much.
Agree. Yes, I saw the anxiety across the board.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what your beliefs were. People were left very anxious, very afraid, for very many reasons. One girl, I remember, she was standing there and started to tremble, then tears came out of her eyes. And she said, she was just overwhelmed. Her words were literally, I just feel overwhelmed because there's so many people all around me all of a sudden. And I haven't been around anyone for the best part of, nearly 2 years? We're talking about March 2021. So they'd only been in school from October to December. Yeah. Many didn't come during that period because they were so afraid.
I mean,
some never came back.
Destroyed, the mental development of almost a whole generation, because those years are pivotal.
Pivotal for socialization, for development. And they didn't have that. And their maturities, they were so confined.
Yeah.
And then they were mainly spending so much time in isolation or on their phones. And that really took shape in the whole internet and the whole Teams.
It did.
Studying on Microsoft Teams, Bill Gates' very own software, all of this stuff, and Zoom came in. That suddenly these kids really lost a lot. We can't easily measure these things.
Definitely.
But we know the damage, we can see it, we can feel it. Even though we're quite aware of what's going on. I mean, you were only a child at the time. I totally empathize so deeply with you because I'm an adult.
Yeah.
And I was, on the outside, obviously, I have to be very strong for the people that I knew, the young people, the kids, the family. I was always very positive with them. And I didn't, like you said, I didn't want to come across as someone who was there to indoctrinate in the other direction.
The other way around.
Yes, then they would say, so you have to, when the truth is there and you have to present the truth, it's actually very easy.
Yes.
Because you don't do it in an indoctrinating way, you do it in a way out of love. And it just all comes out. And it all stems from your concern and your care and your love for these people that, don't worry, it's all going to be fine, everything's going to be all right, there's nothing to worry about, It's fine, And they just needed someone to be there for them, someone who was not hiding from them or shouting at them, because no one would come in the room, literally no one, no head teacher, no deputy, no head of, no one would come in the room. They were so afraid. They'd do everything by Zoom or MS Teams we had. It was just me with them. And so for me, it was just about, they just needed someone to listen and someone to reassure them, because everyone was just so afraid.
Yeah.
The parents were afraid. The teachers were afraid.
Totally.
Their friends were afraid. I wasn't, or at least externally I wasn't. It's only later you start to, when you go home in the evening and then you say to yourself, I really don't know if I'll ever travel ever again. My dad left the country as well, and he got stuck in Pakistan because they're having a lot of jabs over there, so he couldn't travel around. Within the country he couldn't travel. So he got stranded, and we both agreed, I think we said to each other, that, and my brother as well, that we may not see you again, but we agreed that none of us would go there to travel for the other at any cost, because we had to stand up to this tyranny. And if it meant we wouldn't see each other, we'd made that pact that
that's
I'm not willing to travel and he's not willing to travel, and we'll understand that.
Yeah.
Because we felt so strongly about it.
Yeah, that is very strong. Yeah.
But it was scary because in reality you also know that I want to see my dad. I want to have a right to see my dad. I want to have a right to get up and see my earth, Mother Earth, and go to this place and that place.
Yeah.
That should be my God-given right.
Exactly.
My inalienable right.
Inalienable.
So it was scary. It was because you still didn't know these people, I have to be honest, they were and still are really, really crafty. They've got so many traps laid out in front of us.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to fall into these traps.
Exactly.
I think the only way to stay out of it is to keep your energy out of their frequency range. And I think that's what's protected me. I think that with the whole politics, which we may allude to, I think I'd love to hear your views. I mean, I was quite interested in politics growing up. Lately, I've tried to step out of it because I feel that I want to be the director of my own life, not the actor in a script. And I think that if I participate in their activities, then I'm an actor in their script. And I become like the Truman Show, their pawn, the actor that they play with, like many of the other people they play with. So trying to step out of it as much as possible. It's hard because it's bombarded at you. I didn't want to know there was an election yesterday because I didn't want to be a part of it. I wanted to step out of it. But because I feel energetically they feed off us like parasites. They feed off our energy.
Okay.
And if we get our energy into their frequency range, then they can suck us in. But if we move out of that range, then we can avoid it and we can be the directors of our own life, making our own script for ourselves, for our family, for our loved ones, for a better earth.
Interesting.
That was my sort of feeling about it. So I didn't get involved at all energetically, because there may be some good people in there, but I didn't want to participate in that whole cult, this cult of take a pencil and tick this box and play the game, whatever the game is, any part of it. So I thought I'm going to abstain completely and not pay any energetic attention to it. Until now we're talking about it.
Okay. Yeah, of course.
Because I just think that whole system, it's like that. It's a very dark entity, that parliament.
Perhaps, yeah.
That's my sort of feeling. And there's the hospitals and the
I can
universities and all the institutions. They all come together. I saw you saw my interview with Anne and Graham Dixon, how they all came together to collude against that family.
Yes.
The coroners, the police, they've all got their agents in there covering up to make these places look like the sacred cow, the NHS, this sacred cow where everything's the holy religion, you know.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on?
I would say I can see totally where you're coming from, but I also think there's a place for those. It depends on who you are, and I think it depends on your mission for those to kind of go into the stinky, the corrupt, the rotten systems and try and change it, because I think that change does come from within and not from without. You know, there's lots of kind of even holy scriptures and ancient traditions that affirm that kind of point. And so, yes, I totally understand and empathise with the, you know, abstaining from voting. And I myself personally spoilt the ballot anyway. I didn't vote for any party.
Right.
So at this time, but I think that, you know, and even David Icke, people like that talk about that a lot as well, how you are playing into the system when you vote. But I myself, I'm not innately anti-voting and things, because I think that it very much depends on your mission, and there are people whose mission, like David Icke, like many, will be to separate from that and focus on, no, this is how we can uplift ourselves. Other people are a little bit more willing to, you know, maybe to get scratched and go in punching perhaps. So yes, the system needs change. I don't know how anyone could disagree with that. But yes, I think there's many kinds of routes and methods we can do that. So
you make a very good point. I mean, I'm in the system myself. I still am a teacher and I can't get out of it easily. I've handed in my notice not so long ago. They broke me back in. Because you feel like you have all these young people, young people, predominantly are still in the system of the school. I can't make a great effect, I felt, if I was out of it, especially during the COVID years, because many days I wanted to leave. But I realised that by being there, I could be that alternative voice to say, you know, the girl said to me, I have a migraine. And I said, take that mask off your face. And 6 others took the mask off. And I said, you all can take it off if you want. And I think only two. I said, and if you want to wear it, it's okay, but I really think that it's no need in this class. And all of them took it off. And if I hadn't been there to do that, I think at some point they would have taken it off. But because the kids there, a lot of them did take it off in private. You know, they tried to take it off. They were confused, as I say.
Definitely.
And then many other things. I remember a guy was shouting, one of my colleagues was shouting, and I just put an arm on him. It's easy, it's okay, don't worry, I'll talk to them. It's okay, they don't need to, look, it's all right. You know, you just you can make a big impact. You see,
that is an impact from within, isn't it?
And I knew that, you know, if I could start shouting and rebelling and fighting, I'll drain all my energy, my soul will be hurt, my ego might feel better, but I thought it would drain my energy. So I just moved in with that. I had a 1 year 8 class that I had to. It's okay, you can go close, don't worry. No one's going to... And once in a while, someone would come and shout, 2 meters, 2 meters. And I said, no, it's all right.
Yes.
No worries, you get back. So don't worry.
And in some sense, there's almost more bravery doing that from within.
Yeah.
Within the system, within the school, within where, I always respect people, whether it be in the US Congress, in Westminster, those who are an outlier, and there's only a couple of them, but those who really want to not be a nuisance, what they want to do is change, but in order to provoke that change, they are a nuisance to the establishment. And I have a lot of respect for those people, because it's far easier to rant all day about the problems of the world, but being within the world and going within a system you detest in order to change it is, it's very brave, I think.
You realise later, the impact comes later.
Yes.
I remember that for years, I said it's very difficult to quantify the places I've worked a lot with young people over the last 30 years. And my colleagues, we've always clashed. All the people that employed me have always clashed and always agree with my methods. But once in a while, you'd meet a young person some years later. And the impact that you had on that young person's life, I felt at the time it was such a minor thing. I barely remembered him. I was so embarrassed.
Yes.
He remembered me very well.
Yeah.
And he just was shouting, and he was shouting at everyone, people who didn't know me. He was just talking to everyone to tell them, this man changed my life. And it was 2 weeks of video work. It was just another couple of days for me, just in a little school that I went to, a little primary school. We did a bit of video work. And to me, it was just automatic thing that I do. Let's make a film. Let's do whatever you want to do. You want to go there? Okay. Oh, you want to smash some car up? Okay, we can't do that, but I know some car that's smashed somewhere further up the road. You can smash it a bit more. And they enjoyed it because they could let loose and they could tell their story, and the little film was made. And he was one of many, because I used to do these projects in and out fast. You get quick, short job. You do it 5 days to make a film. And then you're out. Those and he saw me, and it was just, and that one. Those words, I mean, and from time to time you'd get that. You see some other kids and they say, I'm taking your advice, sir, I don't drink that Coca-Cola anymore. And all sorts. I bought that distiller, I was really shocked. You realise that you do have an impact. One girl cried because she said, I'm sorry, sir, I really let you down. I took the jab. Because she was really telling me how she wasn't going to take it. And because she had to go and travel with her parents. And she didn't want to, but her parents made her do it. And I remember one girl coming up to me and said, you know my mum, because I knew her mum. And she said, please tell my mum that I don't want to get the jab. She never made me get any jabs in the past because she knows I don't like needles. But she's forcing me to have this one, and these kind of things were coming up. It was very awkward. But I'll be very honest, I was very much able to defy it all. As if I was invisible. This was so surprising to me. And then I knew that there's some greater force of light was with me, some angel was with me, because I was always able to say to the kids, don't worry, you can stand close to each other, don't worry. Don't worry, take the mask off, it's okay. And everyone was in their chaos, everyone in their panic, they were shouting, but they were not focusing in. And they never noticed that I was defying all the time.
That's...
within that environment, it was really like a miracle, because I thought someone somewhere is going to get me, because I've been really like anti, so-called. I don't like to use those words, but I mean, and the kids didn't use those words, because sometime later in 2022, a group of kids came up to me and said, sir, we know you don't like the jabs. Could you tell us more about it? But they never called me an anti-vaxxer. And for some reason, I'm still employed in the school, so clearly they don't know my views fully. It's someone there has protected me. Someone in the universe,
And I think that's a really interesting point. I discuss that a lot when people ask me, kind of, aren't you scared? Don't you get nervous before you tweet that opinion or you share that post about COVID? Don't you get nervous about the backlash? And my response is always, I kind of realised this a few months ago when I really pondered it. My response is always that I see the bigger picture. And for me personally, I am a Christian. So I believe that Christ is with me, and
Lovely.
I see the long term. I see, hold on a minute, there's this man who sacrificed himself, and there's heaven, and there's so much more to existence and this beauty and this light than me, liking this thing and worrying about the backlash, or me being defiant on this one occasion. I just think in a few years I would have forgotten about it. In the long term, there is so much more to life and so much more that is pivotal, that we should focus on the future of our children. These defiant moves, of course they're going to provoke nerves at times, if you're giving a speech or something, if you're giving an interview.
Yes.
But in the long term, I think, when you put it in that perspective and you think there is so much more to existence than the media calling me a name or whatever it might be, I think it kind of lessens that fear.
This is beautifully put. Have you always had faith in Christ for a long time, or did this come about in... When did this come about, do you think?
Around...
And how come?
Two to thank you for letting me touch on this. Probably 2 to 3 years ago, yeah. Very much, I would say, coinciding with the loss of my nan, COVID and all this corruption and seeing so much evil in the world, and also on the practical level, the fact that I accidentally stumbled in to a philosophy and theology lesson and ended up taking this A level that opened my eyes to all these new ideas. And so yes, but I would say at the heart of it was, and I think the reason there is so many people turning to all forms of spirituality and faiths is the evil in the world and the darkness in the world. It's almost like your heart, your soul sees it and turns away from it. You're yanked, you're pulled away from it. And so I think that's why we're hopefully producing a more kind of faithful world, if that makes sense.
Yes, really lovely, yes. it really, you do feel, that there is wonderful light. Even in the darkness, there is a light there, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely.
It's always reassuring to know that we've got through all this time, isn't it? We managed to get through it. It's so sad to read about other people and hear about other people's stories. But I mean, just standing steadfast and standing strong in your faith,
yes,
I think, and knowing perhaps for you that Christ is there and has gone through all of this, that we can get through it as well.
Exactly.
Just have to be very patient.
Yeah.
And have that faith.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's necessary.
How did you get through the school times though? Because I didn't touch very much on it, but I mean, for example, if most of the kids are wearing masks, you got this, horrendous teacher of chemistry putting this kind of pressure on you, guilt tripping you and all this. How did you cope? I mean, how did you manage to get by and not need to wear a mask and so forth and all this?
Yes. It might sound cliche and like I'm repeating myself, but I'd say it was my nan at that time, very much. Whenever there was kind of an event, or I feel this building anger at this teacher kind of with his judgment, or even if there were comments from students, you're not wearing a mask, you're this or you're that. It was always very much, I'll talk to Nan about that later,
Great,
I can unload that on her and she'll have something to say, or some comment, So yes, family, very much, knowing you can go home and you can say, someone, made this comment that's really annoyed me, or there was this judgment, there was this prejudice, because that's what it was prejudice for showing your face, and it's crazy how we could turn on one another like that. But yes, so family, which is why I feel so grateful for it, and I think that those who don't have families were very much hit the hardest, and it couldn't have been more unfair.
I think that was one of the agendas as well, probably prior to the COVID, is to try to destabilise the family.
100%.
Break up the family unit, take away as many homes as possible.
There's so much,
The state then basically take control as well, because they're giving you the benefits, they're giving you their council flats, and then they start to control you, isn't it? Because
Bang on.
Yeah, it's awful, isn't it?
Yes, there's lots of kind of routes that they get to that, but I think that's central, a real central thing, like you said, the breakdown of the family, whether it comes through, you know, COVID, locking down, whether it comes through dividing you from one another.
Yes.
You know, don't come to my Christmas, you're anti-vax, you know, that breaks down the family.
Yeah.
Whether it comes down to more social issues, I don't know, like marriage, you know, when they try to reduce marriage rates or masculinity, whatever it is, there's a lot of routes they kind of can go down, and I think that's because they know that a strong family is reliant on mum, dad, and not reliant on prime minister, state, government, and of course children who don't have that stable family will likely stumble into reliance on the government through no fault of their own. And so that's a central agenda, I think.
Yes. What about the trans agenda at the moment? I mean, my concern is how hard they've been going over the last few years with children. That's my concern. I mean,
exactly.
What's your take on all of that? Because that's
Definitely.
another way of really confusing and causing great physical, mental harm to young children and young people.
It is, and it's causing such stigma and division as well. You know, it's one of those opinions you are certainly not allowed. You know, I think now we are actually allowed more opinions on COVID. We're seeing in the Guardian that lockdown was wrong, and
Who would have thought? Yeah.
yeah, but there's just these one or two topics that you're not quite allowed to touch, and of course that may be LGBT issues. It's very much Israel and Palestine, Ukraine, you know, these topics that the moment you touch on them, you become something. You're either
pariah,
a transphobe, you're the enemy, or, you know, pro-Putin, all of these names they'll throw at you, and it's that division again.
Yeah, they get very, very emphatically,
massively
worked up about it. I think I spoke the other day about the Ukraine thing.
Yes.
You could talk about Yemen, no one's bothered about Yemen. Yemen's getting bombed.
Yeah.
But even Palestine, for some people, you can actually talk about it with some circles.
Yeah.
But this young lady was from Lithuania, so I said, well, you know nothing about it. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a sort of terrible assumption, just because she's from Lithuania, which is a neighbouring country. And she suddenly sat on a high horse and really let rip on me. I didn't get too engaged and said, oh, he's democratically elected. And I almost said, so was Hitler. About Zelensky, you see.
Yeah.
He's a democratic elected. So that's fine. Yes.
I'd even say that statement's a
even
bit iffy.
Yeah, but if you want to have that, well, you know.
Yeah.
I didn't. It's so difficult to engage. The people are so brainwashed.
It is. Yeah.
Yes, but I mean, you know, I have actually been to Ukraine and Russia, both. Obviously,
and I'll tell you, a lot of the politicians haven't.
Yes.
Who are, you know, funding billions.
Yes. What do you think that's all about, the Ukraine saga?
Yes, I think there's a split. There's well-minded people, you know, they see these clips of war and they think, oh, that's awful, we must, you know, fund Ukraine. And then there are people who are a lot more sinister, and this is about, you know, I think Julian Assange put it very well. It's not about a successful war, but an endless war.
Yes.
And this is what we see. We're told if you fund Ukraine more, if you fund Israel more, if you fund everyone more, that means we'll get closer to the end, and we'll get closer to the end. But there comes a point when we have the right, and it doesn't make us pro-Kremlin or pro-whatever, we have the right to ask when the end is.
Yeah.
And maybe, just maybe, if we should be provoking that peace thing a little more than funding more and more weapons and more, because I don't believe that peace comes through war. No. It's kind of an oxymoron.
We've seen it historically. We've seen that, haven't we? I mean, this war, let's talk about the Palestine and Israel. I mean, this has been going on since the very creation of Israel. So that's almost like endless.
Yes, endless war. And it's...
Ukraine in some other form as well is kind of endless as well, because it's really been going on even from the Second World War as well.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah, and I think, you know, Tucker Carlson also put it very well. He said that a war ends in two ways. Either somebody is utterly, completely obliterated and, you know, mass casualties, deaths, etc.,
Yes.
or peace deals,
Yeah.
talks. And of course, we had this talk of a Ukraine peace deal that suddenly disappeared with Mr. Boris Johnson kind of having a bit of an input. And so who knows what is really at the root of
Yes.
everyone's intentions.
Of course.
But what we do know is that there is a military industrial complex.
Yes.
There are people profiting, and it's not about, for many in the establishment, in the deep state, it's not about you know, ending a war. It's about continuing a war.
Yes. And it seems to be more than just money. Sort of, to me, seems to be the
Yes.
surface level evil. The deeper evil is just this. It's a very deeper kind of evil. It's almost like there's some kind of pleasure that these people get out of this because it's so
Yeah.
heinous, the crimes. You know, it's not just about the profit. Yes, that comes as well, but it's this continuation and the loss of lives. I mean, I always think of North Vietnam when they were fighting against the South Vietnamese with the
Yeah.
Americans backing them, and you talk about casualties, isn't it? The number of people that died on the North Vietnamese side,
Yes.
it's hugely outnumbers what happened on the other side.
Yeah.
But it almost seems like the Americans took a battering. It seems as if the Americans lost the war.
Yeah.
But in many ways, it depends how you measure that, because
Yeah.
the number of people that died, millions of civilians died on the North Vietnamese, but they still somehow could not ever be defeated because the spirit, they say,
Exactly.
of the people, the women were fighting. Like you said, they had a very strong family structure, and so the whole family were fighting.
Yeah.
They hadn't expected women to come out and blow the heck out of them, you know.
Yeah.
You read about these sort of stories of heroism, and it doesn't matter what kind of superpower was in their way.
Yeah.
You know, America took a battering, but again, in terms of loss of life, I mean, the North Vietnamese lost well over 1 million by many accounts of civilians before even the army.
Yes, and there's a degradation, excuse me, of life there, of the
Yeah.
value and the
Yes.
sacredness, the sanctity of life,
Yes.
I should say.
And that's where the very heinous evil comes
Yes.
into play to me, that this is something that these people they see us almost as subhuman.
Subhuman.
All of us, I
That's
think,
it.
in some way, they find something in us. They look for psychiatric issues with us. They develop
Yeah.
new psychiatric ideas. I think the Nazis did this, and it was done across the entirety of much of Europe, actually.
Yes.
And American states where the Max Planck Institute was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation, for example, and they were looking for psychiatric conditions to then deem those people to be somehow below human standard, or
Yes.
their standard.
Yeah.
And let's now sterilize them, or let's euthanize them. And this, to me, seems to be happening, or happened during the COVID narrative, where the elderly were suddenly
Definitely.
sacrificed in this terrible way. You probably heard about the case of Tom and Sarah the other day, who finally, I think what happened there was that the young man there, Tom, the mother didn't want him to be jabbed with the COVID jab,
Yeah.
but because he turned 18 and was seen to lack capacity, the state decided that they would, it was in his best interest to jab him against the mother's wishes, and the mother's wishes were totally discarded. Although
Yeah.
it's like they didn't understand the meaning of love. They sort of mentioned love as well, it's the mother's love, but that can't come into this. Emotion can't come into this.
Exactly.
The mother's, we'll
And
put that aside. It's like they don't understand it.
That runs through all of the euthanasia
Yeah.
program, the midazoline, morphine.
Yes.
The one pattern that you've probably seen, Ash, I see, everyone sees who looks into it, is the dismissal of family, I think. You know, family, consent, all of this idea that you get to say you don't want life support turned off. How
You carry
dare
that
you?
child, right?
Yeah.
The mothers carry that child
Yeah.
in her and
And
brought that child up. There's a
exactly.
sacred
Yeah.
relationship there.
But it's this idea that a PhD can put you above that love,
Yeah.
and you get to turn the switch off. You get to make the
Yeah.
decision, and family is nothing. And
Nothing.
Yeah.
This is a tragedy,
So-
leaving them devastated, heartbroken, having to fight. I mean, this poor lady, I think in the end,
Yeah.
she won yesterday.
Yes.
I think that's really the
I've
big
seen
day,
some
4th of
headlines.
July for me. It's the sort of the day of Tom and
Yeah.
mother
Yeah.
Sarah, but they had to go. They should never have had to go through this. That this was all happening behind closed doors. That now we still know that 6-month-old babies are getting jabbed as well. Potentially, the law says that they can. It's horrendous, isn't it? That these jabs, and this is now 2024,
Yes.
when we know how harmful these things. There's not one person that we could talk to who doesn't know someone who's been injured and
Yeah.
is saying it happened in the
Absolutely.
vicinity of and that's only those who know that it happened in the vicinity of taking a jab, that they would say they've not felt right. What happens
Yeah.
10 years later,
Yeah.
when you can't always quite connect these, because a lot of illnesses come later,
Yeah.
because your body tries everything to heal. It's so good at
It's
healing.
a fight.
It's a
Yeah.
fight, yeah. And then 20 years later, you get cancer or you get some other issue of dementia, but people can't connect it to what happened 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah. Exactly.
People can't connect it 3 weeks later sometimes. My uncle had a heart attack
Yeah.
and he had the Pfizer jab. He was promoting it big time. And he's not, his ego won't allow him to admit.
Yeah.
He's admitted everything, like, oh, my lifestyle's this, this is that.
Yeah.
Oh, he's suddenly speaking to me, but he won't apologise for the abuse that he delivered upon us. Not that I want it, I don't want
Yeah.
it, but it's just that recognition, or I think it might have been, or maybe I went too far, or
Yeah. Maybe.
no kind of acknowledgement, but you can just feel in his voice that something he knows is not been, the way he conducted himself is not.
Yeah.
His heroes, Fauci, and he lives in America, his heroes were Fauci and Gates, and he had their books as well, and it
dear.
hasn't quite worked out,
Yeah.
but he's just not able to come to terms. I think a lot of people are not able to come to terms
Yeah.
with what's happened to them.
Well, it is, and I think that's because we don't want to believe that there is evil. It's very much, and I believe there's plenty of people who maybe think they're doing the right thing but aren't. But not everyone is like that. I think there is, especially at the very top of the ruling class, there is a force of evil.
Yes.
And we talk a lot about how awful things like racial supremacy is and things, but I think there's a class supremacy.
Yes.
The idea that those in the establishment, the political media establishment, it doesn't matter how many lives are lost, like we were discussing a moment ago with the degradation of human life, whether it be in a foreign war, whether it be during COVID. It doesn't really matter to them because, and we can't really see through that force of evil, why it exists, but it's there, and I think we need to acknowledge it and kind of not turn away from it, but yes, so...
Flood it with light. Let's flood the world
Exactly.
with the darkness with light, isn't it?
Yeah,
And
face it head on.
Yes, have no fear. Be fearless, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Could I touch on your journalism? What made you go in that direction to set up your own wonderful podcast?
Yeah.
And you've interviewed some amazing guests, fantastic people,
Definitely.
great footballers as well as
Yes.
many others. Yes, Matt Letizier.
That was interesting.
Drop a name there.
Matt Letizier, yes.
My good friend Jackie as well, Jackie Giveaway.
Jackie.
A great journalist. You talked a lot about journalists. Another one who was cancelled,
Yes.
mainstream journalist.
Very quick, and she was kind of, like I said, in that second category where we had, without naming names, well, I will name names, individuals like, Isabel Oakeshott, who would sprinkle, an occasional, complaint about, I don't know, lockdown or this thing, but then you had Jackie, who was willing to not turn away from one scandal because it was inconvenient, but kind of face them all head on.
All of them, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. But no, the journalism, I would say it was very much, I think, probably divinely inspired as well, maybe my nan too. It was just this idea that there had to be change I had within, without using cliche terms, this idea that we the people, this populist idea, we had to stand up, and it's not about this, the bastion of Britain, BBC, being in control and harbouring truth and releasing all of it, but we the people have the ability to kind of,
journalism degree or not, stand up, and as long as you can acknowledge not to lie, you know, as long as you can deliver facts, as long as you can speak with authenticity, then that's what we need more of, because independent voices are necessary. And so it was just this building thing over time. And then just the one specific anecdote I'd use is I don't know if you've ever seen Candace Owens. She's this US political commentator, I guess. Yes, I'm a big fan of her, and I basically just saw this clip come up on my page of her delivering a speech or speaking on this podcast, and it just kind of sparked something. I thought, you know, she's no more divinely inspired, no more made in God's image than you and I, than everyone, than all people, and we can all do that, and, you know, can all give it a shot. And so it was, something from within. I just thought I'd try it out, and now I'm in it. It's kind of, I absolutely adore it, and you know, sparking conversations with, like you said, so many fascinating people.
Really, yes.
With just social media users, I always try to reply to everyone, and you know, encouraging that over time.
And I feel your energy and love as well. I feel really moved and touched that you were very willing to come here so far to have a discussion with me. This has been very, very pleasing. And it was so great to see you at the screening as well.
Yeah.
And on such a very, very moving film, of course.
Yes.
That was also deeply disturbing.
Mm-hmm.
What is your hope for the future? What would you like to see for yourself, for the world that we live in, for humanity?
I think it's very much creating a future where, as Candace Owens, for example, says, more speech, not less. You know, this future where we're never going to have a world where everyone agrees. No. That's a pointless hope. That would be, I'm sure they'd love that actually. That would be very dystopian.
Yes.
But a world where we can disagree without being that scary anti-vaxxer that they need to stay away from, where we can disagree without being an enemy to so-and-so. You know, I would love to see a world where we can debate and have discourse and have speech, more speech, not less, with one another without being the enemy, recognising, you know, we're still people, we still have value.
Absolutely.
We are still sacred, and that needs to be acknowledged. And so a world with less division would be great. A world of awakening as well. You know, hopefully where more people can wake up to, for example, with the election, I would love to see more people wake up to, if this party has destroyed me, I'll just vote for the other one. I would love to see people actually step outside and see that both, especially the main two, are no different from one another, both owned by this deep state that's existed for millennia. And so more awakening, just a practical, real life, I guess, manifested vision would be, I would just love to see some form of independence.
Yes, because it's not at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
After what we've been through, to then say, oh, we'll give Labour a landslide victory, and in 8 years' time, Labour will make a mess of it, and then they'll give a landslide victory to the Conservatives, and it just goes back and forth
and
like
it's this back and forth, this almost like this game of, well, they've ruined my life, I'll give them another go. Because we forget things easily. Even older people, we forget how, you know, 20 years ago, you didn't like that government, remember? You didn't like that group. But it is like this group think that
forget short memories.
Yes, short memories, and this just thinking in a bubble that if you don't like one, it must mean the other. And as an example, for example, Reform UK, far from perfect, and it's why I didn't vote for them yesterday when a lot of my friends' family did. But what I would say is that the massive amount of support they got still kind of hints at a bit of hope in the public that people are sick of the establishment.
Yes.
You know, whether you think reform still is in some way, it shows that there is a bit of light, a vision among, I mean, however many millions of votes on the popular vote they got. It shows there is a vision there of people who are tired of at least what they think is the establishment.
It's quite significant because it's not happened. You might have had one in the past.
Yeah.
You had one UKIP person, didn't you?
Exactly.
That was about all. That was in a by-election, I think.
And you know, politics aside, even if you can't stand the party, even if you can't stand George Galloway's Workers' Party, if he was to win a seat or two, I'd still, you know, when he actually won that by-election in Rochdale, I still said, even if I don't agree on every single issue with George, it's promising that we're seeing an independent voice. It's promising, no matter how rigged you think things are as an individual, it's promising that we're seeing a spirit among the public of, you know, disobedience almost to those in power. That's the good bit.
But do you see any possibility of life without any parliament, without government? I mean, do you see that at all? I believe we've been quite brainwashed to believe that, oh, we've got to have someone, otherwise it'll be anarchy, and then we'll all be lawless and it'll be chaos, and we sort of led to believe that, but we've never obviously experienced that really. We've not really experienced that. We've always been told that in the past it was like that. I've looked into the American Indian culture, and you start to learn, and also some stuff in Britain as well, where you start to question the nature of civilization, that we've been led to believe that, you know, we're all primitive and running around naked and wild.
Yeah.
Although, mind you, there is something to be said about a little bit of time exposing our bodies in the sun, I think, a bit more. But, you know, we've been led to believe that our ancestors are very primitive, very stupid, and, you know, disease-prone and uneducated. But there's so much more evidence of their advanced nature, you know, the fact that there's so many systems they developed, the pyramids, the irrigation systems, mathematics, so many other things, the diet that they had, the ability to not eat for a week, you know, their bodies were so trained, so they almost fasted for a week because they were so, it was not easy to find food.
Yeah.
You know, and then agriculture came along, and then it became a little bit easier. Perhaps, is there a possibility of us not needing, can we not govern ourselves if we brought up well with nurture and care and love, and we're not, you know, we're taken good care of? I think a lot of problems stem from all the jabs and drugs that we're pumped with, you know, and all the conditions. And then for every condition now, there's a drug, isn't it? That half the nation is on, not half, perhaps might be slight exaggeration, but a significant proportion of the nation are on psychiatric drugs, you know, and even children.
Yes.
And this is leading to so many problems. And then there's all the recreational drugs. And there seems to be so much drug use that seems to be altering people's minds. And there's no care and no nurture. And of course, then there's a potential for problems. But in a different kind of world where the community comes together and we raise our children like they belong to all of us, like we all have a responsibility for everybody's child. We don't see them as the other, and you know.
Yes.
We all work together. And is there not a possibility that I don't need anyone to govern myself. I'm a sensible enough person. I can govern myself, thank you very much. We can work together and build systems, still build systems.
Absolutely. I think that would be perfect. I mean, it would be a perfect world. But I don't know. I suppose the question I would ask is that kind of pursuing utopia in some way, is that possible? And, you know, there is, however cliche and boring it sounds, there is the idea of lawlessness and practicalities as well that do come into it. Would it be, if human beings were great, would that be perfect and ideal? Yes. Is it possible realistically? Maybe not so much. But then I suppose the rebuttal would be that the only reason we have governments and things like this is because they're supposed to be representative, right now, they're not.
They're not. None of them are.
So,
The police are not.
exactly.
They pretend to
not.
be representative
Yeah.
of us, but the reality is they're there to protect
Yeah.
the deep state.
So it's not democracy as it is right now. So whether it's absolute anarchy we should be seeking, or actually democracy, which we think we have but we don't, who knows? But I think
Small
way,
government, perhaps, then. Small government.
Small
Less
government.
interference
Oh,
from it,
absolutely.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Small government. We can. Yeah.
A few police.
Certainly
A few
agree.
police. Hopefully not. We won't need hopefully that many if
Yeah.
we can really
Yes.
build a society with nurture and care. Because
But,
we do have a selfish society.
Yes.
We're very much, there's so many people who talk about this where we're so busy like buying all this stuff,
Yeah.
accumulating stuff, and we're neglecting our children. We're putting the children into the care of others, care of the state in the end, because we don't have time to look after them ourselves because we're all busy trying to make a living. And then it's very expensive, and then off we go doing 2 jobs at a time, both parents.
Exactly.
Sometimes broken family. So who's looking after the kids? They're left to their own devices. Sometimes the state then completely takes over,
Yes.
takes them into their wing, and that nearly always proves to be a disaster.
It does. So no, I completely agree.
We're creating a dangerous society.
Yeah. At the very least, small government is necessary. And I think it's a return, not so much to anarchy itself, but a return to what the idea of government initially was meant to be that has become corrupted. And I agree with you that there's certainly things that the system itself represents that are poisonous, but there are also things where I think it was created and could have been hopeful, but like we said, the selfish nature of human beings has corrupted it. So a return to hopefully truth and to freedom. Government was never intended to be this force telling you could see 5 people but not 6. I think that's why COVID acted as a massive awakening, because we saw that the overreach wasn't just, they're taxing us more or whatever, but it was at a dictatorship style point.
Yeah, we followed China. We never followed China in the past, right?
Exactly.
We always distrusted them, but on this one, this is the way to go. I think even Professor Ferguson was interviewed by the Times and said, we didn't think we could get away with it in terms of the lockdown, but when we saw Italy did it, we thought, maybe we can.
Yeah.
And they did.
Exactly. So,
but we must hold them to account at some point.
Change and hold them to account. A complete shift of the vision that they are somehow a class higher than the rest of us. As that quote goes, they work for us.
Yes.
And we do not work for them. That was, of course, the initial premise of these ideas.
Hayden, I've come to the end of my discussion for now.
Wonderful.
We could keep talking of other things,
we could,
but perhaps for another time, perhaps.
Exactly.
Save some energy for the next occasion and more thought.
Yeah.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.